All right, so our final topic on today's roundtable in relation to this new Arizona law. Does recording police officers violate their rights or protect citizens' rights? Tracy, as former FBI, CIA, we are going to kick it over to you first.
I figured as much. I know I'm sounding like kind of a middle of the road kind of person here. I see where both sides are actually coming from. Look, I've been spit at, I've been punched, I've been hit, I've been cursed at. And the fact of the matter is, one of the jobs of police is to secure a crime scene. And the problem becomes when people feel that they can just walk into what we would call an active crime scene and start recording. That's them putting their lives in danger. And then it's restricting police from being able to secure the crime scene and then go potentially after victims that are hurt. So that's sort of the first issue. I think the second issue in policing is what we call discretion. And discretion is a lot of times what gets us into trouble sometimes in policing. I think that the law in and of itself is actually very broad, and that lead-in that you were discussing, really it can criminalize a behavior, and it's leaving that criminalization of the behavior up to the police officer. And it's really putting the onus on them and not into the legal framework. And that becomes the problem, because then you could have a police officer who is criminalizing someone who is perhaps recording at what is believed to be a secure crime scene. And then that becomes problematic. And so I see both sides of it. It is extremely, extremely distracting. I want people to understand when you have someone that is 6 inches away from you trying to record you, and all you are trying to do is subdue a suspect in the safest way possible. And it's extremely distracting.
So the problem that I have with that, though, is that
on police. So I think they already have enough pressure trying to stay safe, trying to stay alive out there. And it puts the person that's recording in danger too if they get that close. I mean, listen, cell phones have zoom features on their cameras. I mean, you can get pretty close and see virtually everything from 10, 12, 15, even 50 feet away. I mean, listen, when Rodney King, when that thing happened in Los Angeles, they were filming from probably about 200-300 feet away, and they were able to get a good shot of what's going on. And that's not to speak to what the outcome of the verdict was, because obviously it was unfair that the police got off and got away with beating them. But for the most part, from 10 to 20 feet, you should be able to get enough. This is more about the police doing their job safely and for people not putting themselves directly in harm's way, I think.
The problem with that logic, though, is that it's not a ban on getting within 8 feet of the officers. If it was really about the proximity, then it would just be a ban on you can't come within 8 feet of the officers when they're arresting a suspect. That's not what it is. And look, at first I freaked out when I saw this law. I'm a civil libertarian. I was all up in arms, First Amendment. When I looked into it, there are exceptions if you're the suspect. There are exceptions if you're in a car. It's more reasonable than I originally thought. And I understand that's not an easy position to be in as a police officer, but at the same time, the footage clears you too. We've also seen many instances where footage clears an officer wrongly accused. And ultimately, these are public officials entrusted with the power of life and death in some situations. I think more transparency, more accountability, more factual evidence about what goes down is a net good for everybody involved.
Well, you know, the thing about it, here's the thing, we do recognize that all of the things that we're seeing, this is not anything new in terms of some of the challenges as far as dealing with the police are concerned. It's not new. What we're finding out is now that we have this ability to record this information, now we're learning that there are some individuals who are not practicing at their job the correct way. I believe we should respect police officers when they're on duty. We should definitely respect the distance. This is something that every citizen should do and every journalist should do as well. However, I think when we're leaving it up to the police officer in that moment, who is clearly distracted with trying to do his job, to make a determination as to whether someone is too close or too far, and if their word is bond and they state that, hey, this person is too far, too close to me, and I say this is, and now that individual has committed a crime, I think we're putting too much on these officers as far as them making a decision in that particular moment. So this definitely needs to be changed so that this way we are very clear about what is expected and what should be respected as well.
And just really quickly, and this might be nitpicking a bit here, but you know, you have to remember many times these officers are very much in a high stress situation. So at what point is it going to be determined wait a minute, sir, wait a minute, ma'am, you are, not 8 feet from me. You're only 6 feet from me, when this officer could be potentially, handling somebody who is in the middle of a crisis.
That's one of my objections.
Nichole, you are totally right.
How are they going to do it?
Are
they going to break out a tape measure?
Arresting members of the Mexican mafia and MS-13 when I was, in LA being a FBI agent there. The last thing I had time to do was pay attention or even care about how close people were to me. And, really to Bryant's point, I do think there needs to be accountability. I have zero issues with anyone ever recording me. It may not be the most flattering moment in my life, but I really have zero issues with that because I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and enforcing the law properly. However, the last thing that I want to care about doing is making sure someone is 8 feet around me when I'm in a dangerous situation.
I can see that. That makes perfect sense to me. So we should not be putting the burden of 8 feet or not, or whatever it is, on the officer. Let them do their job. Let's figure out what this is going to be. And we should, as I said, definitely respect folks when they're working. No one wants to be accosted while they're working and trying to do their job. So we certainly understand that. And I certainly agree with respecting all of our officers. But at the same time, this accountability is absolutely needed, and especially in this particular police department as well, because they have a history, clearly, of what we've read here of discriminating against Black and Native Americans in this area. So we definitely need the accountability, but there should be some clarity on exactly who should determine what that law is. And in my opinion, it should not be the officer who is on duty.
And just really quickly, are the body cameras and maybe nearby surveillance cameras going to be enough potentially to hold police accountable or have that transparency? Very quickly.
No, only if a body camera is remotely controllable. You don't want to have a body camera that an officer is controlling. I think the best thing is to have a body camera that goes on when they exit their car. It's all remotely controlled and not on the officer to control that, because then you get into a situation where it can be altered.
I think I saw all heads nodding there. That's
great.
All right, well, panel, thank you so much. That is the end of the discussion. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.